What happens when a man of war chooses mercy over revenge? When a single act of kindness sparks a chain of events that could either unite two worlds or tear them apart forever? You're about to witness a story of courage, betrayal, and impossible choices that will leave you breathless. Stay with me until the end, because what happens next will shock you. The Texas sun hammered down on the plains like a blacksmith's anvil in the summer of 1868. Swift Hawk rode the perimeter of his Comanche camp, sweat trickling down his bronzed back, when he heard something that made his blood run cold. Laughter, not the good kind, the cruel kind that meant someone was suffering. He kicked his Mustang forward, and what he saw stopped him dead. A circle of young warriors surrounded a white woman on her knees in the dirt. Her dress was torn. Her face was streaked with tears and dust. But her eyes, those blue eyes, burned with a defiance that reminded Swift Hawk of a cornered wolf. She wasn't begging. She wasn't crying. She was waiting. "Stand aside," Swift Hawk commanded in his native tongue, his voice cutting through the jeers like a blade. The young warriors hesitated. They looked at each other, unsure. Swift Hawk was the son of Running Bear, a legend among the Numunu people. You didn't ignore him lightly. Red Wolf stepped forward, barely 20 summers old, chest puffed with false bravado. "This white woman tried to steal a horse. She was escaping." Swift Hawk's eyes narrowed. He looked down at the woman. "Is this true?" For the first time she raised her head and met his gaze directly. Fear flickered there, yes, but also something else. Courage. Raw, unfiltered courage. "I was not stealing," she said in broken Comanche, words she'd learned during weeks of captivity. "I was bringing water from the river. They surrounded me." Swift Hawk saw the overturned water skin at her feet, its contents disappearing into the thirsty earth. He turned back to Red Wolf, whose face betrayed the lie before his mouth could. "You dishonor yourself with untruths," Swift Hawk said quietly, but every man there heard the steel in his voice. "And you dishonor our people by treating a captive this way." Red Wolf's jaw clenched. "She is just a white woman. Her people killed my brother last moon." Swift Hawk understood grief. He understood rage. But he also understood something these young warriors didn't. That honor meant nothing if you only showed it to your friends. "Your brother died as a warrior. There is no honor in tormenting a defenseless woman." He extended his hand to the captive. "What is your name?" She stared at his hand like it might be a trap. "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Mitchell. Come, Sarah Mitchell. You will not be harmed further. I give my word as Swift Hawk, son of Running Bear." Something in his steady gaze convinced her. Slowly, carefully, she placed her hand in his and rose to her feet. Red Wolf's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "Chief Black Cloud will hear of this. He has decreed that all white captives are to be treated as enemies." Swift Hawk turned, his face grave as stone. "Then I will speak with the chief myself. Until then, no one touches this woman." But as he led Sarah toward his mother's teepee, Swift Hawk had no idea he'd just set in motion events that would change not just his life, but the fate of his entire tribe. Because sometimes, a single act of kindness can start a war. Or end one. Sarah walked beside him in silence, and finally she asked, "Why did you help me?" Swift Hawk considered his answer carefully. "My father taught me that true strength is shown in how we treat those who have no power. The young men who tormented you, they are not strong. They are afraid." "Afraid of me?" Disbelief colored her words. "Of what you represent. Change is coming to our lands. They feel it, as do I." He glanced at the horizon where dust clouds marked cavalry patrols in the distance. But fear should never guide our actions. As they approached his mother's teepee, the old woman's singing bird emerged, her weathered face creasing with concern. Without a word, she ushered Sarah inside. "I must speak with Black Cloud," Swift Hawk told his mother. "Keep her safe until I return." Singing Bird's eyes filled with worry. "Be careful, my son. The chief's heart has grown hard since losing his wife to the white man's sickness." Swift Hawk mounted his horse and rode toward the center of camp, where Black Cloud's large teepee stood like a sentinel. The decision to intervene had been instinctive. Now, he needed to be strategic. His standing in the tribe, Sarah's life, perhaps the future of his people, all of it hung in the balance. And he was about to walk straight into the fire. Chief Black Cloud sat cross-legged on an elaborate buffalo hide, his 60-year-old face lined with wisdom and hardship. Despite his age, his eyes missed nothing as Swift Hawk entered and took his place across the fire. "I have heard of your actions today," Black Cloud began without preamble. "You interfered with the punishment of a captive." "There was no punishment," Swift Hawk replied steadily. "Only torment. The woman had committed no offense. Red Wolf claims she attempted escape." "Red Wolf speaks falsely. His heart is clouded by grief for his brother." Black Cloud was silent for a long moment, smoke from his pipe swirling between them. "You have always been different from the others, Swift Hawk. You learned the white man's tongue. You studied their ways. Some whisper that you sympathize too much with our enemies." "I seek to understand them," Swift Hawk replied. "Knowledge of an enemy is a powerful weapon. And yet today, you protected one of them." Swift Hawk leaned forward slightly. "I protected the honor of our people. The Numunu have always been fierce in battle, but we do not make war on unarmed women." Something flickered in Black Cloud's eyes. Perhaps approval, perhaps memory. "You speak like your father. He too believed in the old ways." The chief tapped his pipe against a stone bowl, considering. Then he dropped the words that would change everything. "Tell me, what would you have me do with this captive?" "Allow her to continue working under Yellowleaf's guidance. She has shown willingness to learn our ways and has caused no trouble until Red Wolf's interference." Black Cloud exhaled a plume of smoke. "And if I decide she should be ransomed back to her people, or traded at the next meeting with the white officials?" Swift Hawk felt a strange tightness in his chest at the thought, but kept his expression neutral. "That would be your right as chief." After what seemed an eternity, Black Cloud nodded. "Very well. The woman will remain under Yellowleaf's supervision. But I am also making her your responsibility, Swift Hawk. If she attempts escape or brings harm to our people, it will be on your head." Swift Hawk's stomach dropped, but he held his voice steady. "I accept this responsibility. There is something else." Black Cloud set aside his pipe, his expression darkening. "Scouts have reported increased cavalry movements to the south. The white soldiers are establishing a new fort just 2 days' ride from here." Swift Hawk's world tilted. A new fort meant more soldiers, more settlers, more pressure on the Comanche way of life. "They encroach further onto our hunting grounds." "Yes," Black Cloud said grimly, "and with them come more fences, more destruction of the buffalo. I am calling a council meeting tonight. We must decide whether to move our camp northward or stand our ground." As Swift Hawk left the chief's teepee, his mind reeled. He'd just taken personal responsibility for a white captive. His people faced a new military threat. And somehow, these two problems felt dangerously connected in ways he couldn't yet see. When he returned to his mother's dwelling, he found Sarah sitting beside Singing Bird, awkwardly helping prepare dried berries for storage. She'd been given clean clothing, a simple deerskin dress, and her hair had been combed and braided in the Comanche style. The transformation was striking. Singing Bird noticed him first. "Your father would be proud of what you did today," she said in their language, her eyes crinkling. Sarah looked up, her hands stilling. "What did the chief say?" Fear threaded through her voice. Swift Hawk moved to sit across from them, switching to English so she'd understand clearly. "You will continue to work with Yellowleaf, but you are also now my responsibility. If you try to escape or harm anyone, I will bear the punishment." Sarah's eyes widened. "Why would you take such a risk for me?" "I believe people should be judged by their actions, not where they were born or the color of their skin. You have worked hard and learned our ways without complaint. This deserves respect." Singing Bird rose with a soft grunt and moved away, giving them privacy. "How long have I been here now?" Sarah asked quietly. "I've lost count of the days. Nearly 1 moon cycle, about 30 days in your counting." Sarah's eyes drifted to the teepee opening where late afternoon light filtered through. "My father and brother will be searching for me. if they survived the attack. Swift Hawk felt sympathy twist in his gut. The raid was led by warriors from a different band. I cannot speak to who survived. Heavy silence fell between them, filled with all the things they couldn't say. She was a captive. He was her reluctant guardian. Both were caught in the grinding gears of a conflict neither had started. Finally, Sarah spoke again. Thank you, Swift Hawk. Not just for today, but for seeing me as a person. Her voice caught. Some days I fear I will forget who I am. Who were you before? He asked, genuinely curious. In your previous life? A ghost of a smile touched her lips. I was a teacher in a small settlement near Fort Richardson. I taught children their letters and numbers. Her expression softened. My father was a minister. We came west because he believed God called him to bring his word to the frontier. Swift Hawk nodded, understanding more about her now. Teachers are respected among your people. Yes, though not paid very well, she replied with unexpected humor. Among the Numunu, those who pass knowledge to the young are also respected. Perhaps we are not so different in some ways. The moment shattered as shouts erupted outside. Swift Hawk rose quickly and moved to the entrance. In the distance, riders approached the camp at speed. Comanche scouts returning with the kind of urgency that meant trouble. I must go, he told Sarah. Stay here with my mother. You will be safe. But as he stepped outside, Swift Hawk couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The fragile peace he'd brokered for Sarah might prove short-lived. Because in war, captives were either bargaining chips or liabilities. And Swift Hawk was beginning to realize Sarah Mitchell was becoming something far more dangerous than either. She was becoming someone he cared about. The council fire blazed high into the night sky, sending embers spiraling toward the stars. Around the flames sat tribal elders and war chiefs, their faces etched with concern as they listened to the scout's report. Running Deer, the head scout, painted a grim picture. They come with many soldiers, more than the fingers on both hands counted 3 times. They bring the big guns that shoot far, and horses pulling wagons filled with supplies. Black Cloud's expression remained impassive, but Swift Hawk saw the tension in the chief's shoulders. How close are they to our hunting grounds? They have begun clearing land for their fort where Buffalo Creek meets the Red River. Running Deer's voice was grave. They cut trees and dig into the earth. Already they have raised their flag. Murmurs rippled through the assembled leaders. That location wasn't just hunting territory. It was sacred ground where generations of Comanche had conducted important ceremonies. Broken Knife, an older warrior with a scar bisecting his face, spoke next. We should attack now while they are still building. Strike before their walls are strong. Several voices rose in agreement, and Swift Hawk felt the tide turning toward war. But Black Cloud raised his hand. Such an attack would bring more soldiers, the chief said. Always they return with more. We have seen this pattern with other tribes. His gaze swept the council. We must think not just of today's battle, but of our children's future. Swift Hawk felt the weight of the moment pressing upon him. He'd witnessed firsthand the devastating power of white man's weapons during a peace delegation 2 years earlier. The memories of cannon destruction remained vivid. Chief, Swift Hawk said respectfully, waiting for Black Cloud's nod. Perhaps we could send a delegation to speak with their leader. Establish boundaries that respect our sacred sites. Broken Knife scoffed. They do not honor boundaries. Every treaty they make, they break when it suits them. This is true, Swift Hawk acknowledged. But a delegation would also allow us to observe their strength up close, to see their weapons and count their numbers accurately. Knowledge that would serve us whether we choose peace or war. Black Cloud stroked his chin thoughtfully. Your words have wisdom, Swift Hawk. But who would lead such a delegation? It would require someone who speaks their tongue. The implication hung in the air. Swift Hawk knew he was one of the few in the tribe who could communicate effectively in English. I will go, Swift Hawk offered, meeting the chief's gaze steadily. With your blessing. And if they take you prisoner? Broken Knife challenged. or kill you for approaching their camp? I will carry the peace feather and approach openly. Even the white soldiers recognize certain symbols. Black Cloud nodded slowly. You will take 2 warriors with you, Grey Wolf and Tall Pine. They are steady men who will not act rashly. The chief raised his voice to address the entire council. We will send this delegation, but we also prepare for war. If Swift-Hawk's words fall on deaf ears, we must be ready to defend what is ours. As the council continued, Swift-Hawk's thoughts turned unexpectedly to Sarah Mitchell. The establishment of a new fort could change her situation dramatically. If negotiations failed and conflict erupted, captives might become liabilities or valuable bargaining chips. Or they might become casualties. When the council finally dispersed in the early hours before dawn, Swift-Hawk made his way back to his mother's teepee. He found both women asleep, Sarah curled on a buffalo robe near dying embers. In sleep, the weariness that usually guarded her features had vanished, making her appear younger and more vulnerable. Swift-Hawk sat quietly at the teepee's entrance, watching the first pale light of dawn creep across the eastern horizon. His mission to the fort would begin at midday. His mind was too active for sleep. He was still sitting there when Sarah awoke, her eyes finding him immediately. Something's happened, she said, reading his expression with surprising accuracy. Swift-Hawk nodded. Your people are building a new fort on our sacred lands. Sarah sat up, pulling a blanket around her shoulders. Which regiment did your scouts say? They described blue coats with yellow cloth here, he indicated his shoulders, and a flag with many stars. Cavalry, then, she murmured, probably from Fort Richardson. A complicated emotion crossed her face. Hope mingled with concern, and Swift-Hawk saw the conflict there. Hope for rescue, fear for what that rescue might cost. What will your tribe do? She asked. I am leading a delegation to speak with their commander. We leave at midday. Sarah hesitated. Could you deliver a message? Just to let them know I'm alive? Swift-Hawk considered her request. Such a message might actually help his cause, showing goodwill while confirming the tribe held valuable captives. Yet he also recognized the risk. The soldiers might demand her immediate return, potentially under threat of force. I will tell them a white woman teacher lives among us, he said finally. No more than that for now. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. My father, if he's there, he needs to know I'm alive. As the morning progressed, Swift-Hawk prepared for the delegation. He chose his finest buckskin shirt, adorned with porcupine quillwork that signified his status. Around his neck, he wore a necklace of bear claws that had belonged to his father. Before departing, he sought out Sarah once more. She was working with Yellowleaf, grinding corn into meal. I will be gone for perhaps 2 days, he told her. My mother will ensure you are protected in my absence. Sarah set down her grinding stone. Be careful. The soldiers are on edge after recent attacks. They may shoot before listening. Swift-Hawk appreciated the warning. Is there anything about their ways I should know? Something that might help our words be heard? Sarah considered this seriously. Ask to speak with the chaplain as well as the commanding officer. Military men respect the church, and a minister might advocate for peaceful resolution. She hesitated. And if my father is there, Reverend Mitchell, he has influence with many of the settlers. I will remember this advice. As he turned to leave, a strange impulse made him add, when I return, perhaps you could teach me more of your written language. In exchange, I could teach you more of ours. The offer seemed to catch her off guard. After a moment, she nodded. I would like that. As Swift-Hawk mounted his horse and led the small delegation from camp, he found himself carrying hopes for peace from both his people and the captive woman who was increasingly becoming something more complicated than an enemy. The burden was heavy, but his heart was resolute. What he didn't know was that the fort held more than soldiers and supplies. It held Sarah's father, and a colonel with very different ideas about peace. The fort was little more than a collection of half-constructed wooden buildings surrounded by a partially completed stockade wall. Swift Hawk and his companions stopped at a respectful distance on a rise overlooking the bustling activity, and Swift Hawk raised the peace feather high above his head. It took less than a minute for soldiers to notice them. Swift Hawk observed as men shouted and ran for weapons. Officers barked orders. Work on the fort temporarily ceased. 3 mounted soldiers approached cautiously, rifles at the ready. "I speak English," Swift Hawk called out when they were within earshot. "We come in peace to talk with your chief." The lead soldier, a weathered man with sergeant's stripes, regarded them suspiciously. "State your business." "We bring words from Chief Black Cloud of the Numunu, the Comanche people. We wish to speak of boundaries and peace." The sergeant spat to one side. "Peace, is it? After your people raided the Mitchell homestead last month?" Nevertheless, he gestured for them to follow. "You'll surrender your weapons before entering." Swift Hawk translated for his companions, who looked unhappy but complied. They handed over bows, knives, and tomahawks at the fort's makeshift gate, keeping only the ceremonial peace pipe. Inside, the fort was a hive of activity. Swift Hawk noted everything with careful attention. The number of men, the crates that likely contained ammunition, the corral holding cavalry horses. This information would be valuable regardless of the outcome. They were led to the largest completed structure, a wooden building with a veranda. On the porch stood a tall man with a gray beard and colonel's insignia, along with a younger officer and, to Swift Hawk's surprise, a man in black clothing with a white collar. The chaplain Sarah had mentioned. "Colonel Harrington," the sergeant announced. "Delegation from the Comanche, sir." The colonel studied them with hard eyes. "I am Colonel James Harrington, commander of this installation. Who speaks for your group?" Swift Hawk stepped forward. "I am Swift Hawk, son of Running Bear, representing Chief Black Cloud of the Numunu people." The colonel raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by Swift Hawk's command of English. "And what does Chief Black Cloud have to say to the United States Army?" "Our chief wishes to establish clear boundaries between our hunting grounds and your fort. This place where you build sits on land sacred to our people for many generations." The colonel's expression remained impassive. "This fort is being constructed on land ceded to the United States government by treaty. We have every right to be here." Swift Hawk had anticipated this response. "The treaty you speak of was not signed by the Numunu bands who have always hunted these lands. We do not recognize its authority over us." Tense silence followed. The younger officer whispered something to the colonel, who frowned but nodded slightly. "You speak our language well," the colonel finally said. "Where did you learn it?" "From traders and from a settler who lived among us for a time." The man in clerical dress stepped forward. "I am Reverend Thomas Wilson, chaplain to this company. May I ask if your people are currently holding any white captives?" Swift Hawk met the chaplain's gaze steadily. "We have a white woman living among us. She was a teacher before she came to us." This statement caused immediate commotion. From the back of the veranda, an older man with a grief-lined face pushed forward. "A teacher?" The man's voice broke. "Is her name Sarah Mitchell? Is she alive?" The intensity of his question confirmed Swift Hawk's suspicion. "Are you Reverend Mitchell?" "I am. Sarah is my daughter. Please, is she well?" Swift Hawk felt unexpected sympathy for the man's obvious distress. "She is alive and unharmed. She grinds corn with our women and has learned some of our language." The relief that washed over Reverend Mitchell's face was palpable. "Thank God," he whispered. "Colonel, we must arrange for her return immediately." But Colonel Harrington raised a hand. "All in good time, Reverend." He turned back to Swift Hawk. "I presume the return of captives would be part of any peace negotiation?" "That would be for the chief to decide," Swift Hawk replied carefully. "But it could be discussed if our concerns about the sacred land are addressed." The colonel's jaw tightened. "This fort will be completed as planned. However," he added, seeing Swift Hawk's expression darken, "perhaps we could discuss which specific areas nearby hold particular importance to your people." It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. What followed was 3 hours of tense but productive negotiation. Maps were brought out. Boundaries were proposed and adjusted. Swift Hawk was surprised by Colonel Harrington's willingness to compromise on certain points, though he remained inflexible about the fort's location itself. Throughout the discussion, Reverend Mitchell hovered anxiously, clearly desperate for news of his daughter. As the talks concluded with a tentative verbal agreement, Reverend Mitchell finally approached Swift Hawk directly. "Please, may I send a letter to my daughter?" His voice was thick with emotion. "Just a few words to let her know her father lives and prays for her return." Swift Hawk considered the request. There seemed no harm in it. "You may write your words. I will carry them to her." While the Reverend hurriedly penned his letter, Colonel Harrington took Swift Hawk aside. "I appreciate your willingness to negotiate, but understand this. If any harm comes to the Mitchell woman or any other captives, there will be severe consequences. The Army does not take kindly to the abduction of civilians." Swift Hawk met the colonel's stern gaze without flinching. "And my people do not take kindly to the theft of our ancestral lands. But for now, we choose the path of peace, if you will walk it with us." When they finally departed, the sun was already dipping toward the horizon. Swift Hawk carried Reverend Mitchell's sealed letter and a formal document outlining preliminary agreements. He also carried something less tangible, a cautious hope that bloodshed might be averted. At least for now. But what Swift Hawk didn't know was that Red Wolf had been watching, waiting, planning, and the young warrior's wounded pride was about to become everyone's problem. The return journey was made in silence, each warrior lost in thought. It was nearly midnight when they arrived, but Black Cloud had waited for their return. After Swift Hawk delivered his report to the chief and council, he sought out his mother's tepee. Despite the late hour, a small fire still burned inside. Both Sarah and Singing Bird were awake, their faces anxious. "You've returned safely," Sarah said, relief evident. Swift Hawk nodded, settling beside the fire. "I have something for you." He withdrew the sealed letter and handed it to her. Sarah's hands trembled as she took the folded paper. "My father. He's alive?" "Yes, he is at the fort, serving as a minister to the soldiers and settlers." Tears welled in her eyes as she opened the letter and read by firelight. Swift Hawk watched as emotions played across her face. Joy, longing, and something more complex he couldn't quite identify. "He says he's negotiating for my return," she said, finally looking up. "That the colonel has agreed to include me in the peace talks." "This is true," Swift Hawk confirmed. "The safe return of captives is part of the agreement we are working toward." Unexpected silence fell between them as the implications settled. For nearly 5 weeks, Sarah had been part of the Comanche camp. Initially as a frightened captive, then gradually adapting. Now the prospect of her departure was suddenly real and imminent. "What happens next?" she asked quietly. "There will be a formal council with representatives from the fort in 10 days. If all goes well, arrangements will be made then." Sarah nodded, folding the letter carefully. 10 days, she repeated, almost to herself. In the days that followed, Swift Hawk noticed a subtle change in Sarah's demeanor. She threw herself into learning more Comanche phrases, spent additional time helping Singing Bird, even joined the women collecting berries beyond the camp's perimeter, activities she had previously approached with resignation rather than enthusiasm. On the evening before the formal council was to convene, Swift Hawk found Sarah sitting alone by the creek, watching the sunset paint the water with gold and crimson. "My mother wondered where you had gone," he said, sitting beside her on a flat rock. "I needed to think," she replied. "Tomorrow, everything changes again." Swift Hawk nodded. "You will return to your father and your people. This is good." "Yes," she agreed, though without the joy he might have expected. "But I find myself thinking about what I've learned here, about the Numunu, your customs, your respect for the land." She turned to face him directly. "My father's congregation fears and hates the Comanche because they don't understand your ways. Perhaps I could help change that." Swift Hawk regarded her with surprise. "You would speak for us?" "I would speak the truth as I've experienced it, that there are good people among the Comanche just as there are among the settlers. That understanding might achieve what violence never will." Something shifted between them in that moment. A recognition of shared purpose that transcended their different worlds. But neither of them knew that Red Wolf had been listening from the shadows. and what he'd heard would drive him to desperate action. The next day, representatives from the fort arrived for the council meeting. Sarah stood alongside Swifthawk and Black Cloud to welcome them, wearing a dress that Singing Bird had made for her, combining elements of both cultures. When Reverend Mitchell spotted his daughter, he rushed forward with a cry of joy, embracing her tightly. Swifthawk stepped back, giving them space, though he noted that Sarah kept glancing back toward the Comanche, who had become her temporary family. The negotiations proceeded with surprising smoothness. With Sarah helping bridge cultural misunderstandings, agreements were reached on territorial boundaries, mutual notification before hunting parties entered disputed areas, and procedures for addressing future grievances. Finally, the formal arrangement for Sarah's return was confirmed. She would leave with her father when the council concluded. Swifthawk should have felt relief. Instead, he felt a strange emptiness. As Sarah prepared to depart, she sought him out one last time. "I want you to have this," she said, pressing a small object into his hand. It was a simple wooden cross on a leather cord, modest but clearly precious to her. "This was my mother's," she explained, "to remind you that friendship can exist even between those who walk different paths." Swifthawk accepted the gift with solemn respect. "And for you," he replied, removing the necklace of small turquoise beads from around his own wrist, "to remember that you have friends among the Numunu." As Sarah climbed into the wagon, she called out one last phrase in perfect Comanche. "Until we meet again, under peaceful skies." Swifthawk raised his hand in farewell, the wooden cross cool against his palm. "Until then," he replied in English. The wagon pulled away, disappearing into the distance. Black Cloud came to stand beside him. "You have done well, Swifthawk. Your father would be proud. We have bought time and understanding. But the challenges remain." Swifthawk replied honestly. "Yes," the chief agreed. "But today we found a path other than war. And perhaps in that teacher who lived among us, we have found an unexpected voice for peace among our enemies." Swifthawk touched the cross now hanging alongside his bear claw necklace, two symbols from different worlds, side by side. Like the tentative peace they had established, it was fragile, but full of possibility. And for now, that was enough. But what no one saw was Red Wolf watching from a hilltop, his face twisted with rage. In his mind, Swifthawk had betrayed his people, had grown soft, had let their enemy go free. And Red Wolf was about to make sure everyone paid for that mistake. 3 days after Sarah's departure, Swifthawk was hunting elk in the western hills when he heard the sound that would shatter everything. War cries echoing across the valley. He kicked his horse into a gallop, racing back toward camp, his heart pounding. Smoke rose from the direction of the fort. When he arrived at the Comanche camp, chaos reigned. Warriors were mounting horses, painting their faces for battle. Women were frantically packing belongings. Swifthawk found Black Cloud in his teepee, his face a mask of barely controlled fury. "What has happened?" Swifthawk demanded. "Red Wolf!" the chief spat. "He took a dozen young warriors and attacked a supply wagon heading to the fort. They killed 3 soldiers and took their weapons." Swifthawk's blood ran cold. "When?" "Yesterday. The soldiers will retaliate. Our peace is broken." "Red Wolf did this without your permission?" "He claimed I had grown weak, that the council's decision to negotiate was cowardice." Black Cloud's voice shook with anger. "He said Swifthawk had been bewitched by the white woman and could no longer be trusted to protect our people." Swifthawk felt the world tilting beneath him. Everything they'd worked for, destroyed by one angry young warrior's pride. "The soldiers will come," Swifthawk said. "Soon." "They are already moving," Black Cloud replied grimly. "Scouts report a column heading this way, 24 cavalry. They will be here by tomorrow morning. We must evacuate." "We are already preparing." "But Swifthawk," the chief's eyes bore into him. "There is something else. Red Wolf took captives from the wagon. 2 white men. He is holding them at a camp in the canyon, threatening to kill them if we surrender." Swifthawk closed his eyes, his worst fears materializing. "He is trying to force us into war." "Yes, and he may succeed." That night, Swift Hawk lay awake in his mother's teepee, the wooden cross Sarah had given him heavy around his neck. He thought of her words. Understanding might achieve what violence never will. Red Wolf had taken that possibility and set it ablaze. But perhaps there was still a chance. A slim, desperate chance. As dawn broke, Swift Hawk made his decision. He would go to Red Wolf's canyon camp. He would try to convince the young warrior to release the captives. And if that failed... He didn't let himself finish that thought. He told no one of his plan, not even his mother. He simply took his horse and rode toward the canyon as the sun climbed higher in the sky. When he arrived, he found Red Wolf and his warriors celebrating their victory, the two white captives bound and terrified near a fire. "Red Wolf," Swift Hawk called out, dismounting. "We must talk." The young warrior turned, his face flushed with arrogance. "The great Swift Hawk, friend to our enemies. Have you come to beg me to release these white dogs? I have come to ask you to think of our people. What you have done will bring destruction upon us all." Red Wolf laughed. "What I have done? You are the one who protected that white woman. You are the one who negotiated like a coward instead of fighting like a warrior. There is no cowardice in seeking peace. There is no honor in weakness." Red Wolf drew his knife. "Our people die because of men like you who forget what it means to be Numunu." Swift Hawk saw the madness in the young warrior's eyes. The grief over his brother's death twisted into something poisonous. "I challenge you," Red Wolf said suddenly. "Fight me. If you win, I release the captives. If I win, they die. And you die with them." A murmur ran through the gathered warriors. This was serious. A formal challenge could not be refused without dishonor. Swift Hawk looked at the terrified captives, at Red Wolf's crazed expression, at the warriors who watched to see what he would do. He had come here hoping to avoid more bloodshed. Instead, he was about to guarantee it. "I accept," Swift Hawk said quietly. The fight was brutal and swift. Red Wolf fought with rage, Swift Hawk with grim necessity. They circled each other, knives flashing in the morning sun. Red Wolf lunged, and Swift Hawk sidestepped, but not fast enough. The blade caught his shoulder, drawing blood. The warriors shouted encouragement to Red Wolf. Swift Hawk gritted his teeth against the pain. He couldn't afford to lose. Too much depended on this moment. Red Wolf attacked again, and this time Swift Hawk was ready. He caught the young warrior's wrist, twisted, and brought his knee up into Red Wolf's stomach. As Red Wolf doubled over, gasping, Swift Hawk hooked his leg and sent him crashing to the ground. Swift Hawk's knife was at Red Wolf's throat before the young warrior could recover. "Yield," Swift Hawk commanded. Red Wolf's eyes blazed with hatred, but he had no choice. "I yield." Swift Hawk stood, helping Red Wolf to his feet despite the burning pain in his shoulder. "Release the captives. Now." But as the bound men were being cut free, a sound made everyone freeze. Hoofbeats. Many of them. Cavalry. They'd been spotted, and the soldiers were coming. "Everyone mount up!" Swift Hawk shouted. "We ride for the main camp. Now!" They raced through the canyon, the two freed captives riding double with Comanche warriors, the sound of pursuit growing louder behind them. Swift Hawk's mind raced. If they could reach the main camp before the soldiers, perhaps they could still avoid a full battle. Perhaps he could still salvage something from this disaster. But when they burst out of the canyon and crested the hill overlooking the camp, Swift Hawk's heart sank. They were too late. The cavalry had arrived first. The camp was surrounded. Tents were burning. Women and children were being herded together. Warriors were being disarmed. Black Cloud stood in the center, hands raised, trying to prevent a massacre. And standing beside the colonel, looking shocked and devastated, was Sarah Mitchell. She had returned with the soldiers, perhaps to act as translator, perhaps to help ensure peaceful surrender. Now she watched in horror as Swift Hawk and Red Wolf's warriors appeared on the hilltop with two cavalry captives. To the soldiers, it looked like an attack. Rifles were raised, orders were shouted. Swift Hawk had seconds to act. He could fight, and everyone would die. He could flee, and the soldiers would take vengeance on the camp below. Or he could do something that would save his people but cost him everything. He dismounted, handed his knife to the nearest warrior. and rode down the hill alone, hands raised toward the line of soldiers and their leveled rifles. "Hold your fire," he shouted in English. "I am Swift Hawk. I negotiated with Colonel Harrington. These captives are unharmed. I am returning them to you." The colonel sat on his horse, face hard as granite. "You're returning them after your warriors murdered 3 of my men?" "That was not done with our chief's permission. Red Wolf acted alone. He has been challenged and defeated. The captives are free." Sarah pushed forward. "Colonel, please, let him speak." The colonel ignored her. "You're under arrest, all of you. Lay down your weapons." Behind Swift Hawk, he heard Red Wolf and the other warriors murmuring. They wouldn't surrender. This was going to end in blood, unless Swift Hawk gave the soldiers what they wanted. "Take me," Swift Hawk said. "I am responsible for all Comanche in this region. I will answer for what Red Wolf did, but let my people go in peace." "Swift Hawk, no!" Sarah's voice cut through the tension. But Swift Hawk kept his eyes on the colonel. "You want justice for your dead soldiers. I offer myself in exchange for peace. This is our way. One life for many." The colonel considered this for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Very well. You'll stand trial for the murders. The rest can go free, but they must move north, away from this territory." "Agreed." As soldiers moved forward to bind Swift Hawk's hands, Sarah broke free and ran to him. "You can't do this," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You didn't kill anyone. This isn't justice." Swift Hawk looked at her, and for the first time allowed himself to show what he'd been hiding for weeks. "Sometimes one person must sacrifice for others to live. You taught me that. Your cross reminds me of a man who did the same. That's not what I meant. That's not—" But soldiers were pulling her back. Swift Hawk was being led away. Black Cloud approached, his face grave. "You have the heart of your father, Swift Hawk. You will be remembered." As Swift Hawk was placed on a horse, his hands bound, he looked back one last time at his people. His mother weeping, the warriors, torn between shame and gratitude, the children, who would live because of his choice, and Sarah, still trying to break free, still shouting his name. The wooden cross hung heavy around his neck as the column began to move toward the fort. He had saved his people. He had prevented war. He had bought them time to escape and rebuild. But the cost was his freedom, maybe his life. And as the Comanche camp disappeared behind them, Swift Hawk wondered if the price of peace was always this high. The fort's stockade closed behind Swift Hawk with a finality that echoed in his bones. They placed him in a small wooden cell, barely large enough to stand. Through the bars, he could see soldiers going about their duties, their faces hard when they glanced his way. 3 days passed. Swift Hawk was given water and minimal food. No one spoke to him except the guard who brought his meals. On the 4th day, Colonel Harrington visited. "You'll hang in 3 days," the colonel said without preamble. "Military tribunal found you guilty of conspiracy in the murder of 3 United States soldiers." Swift Hawk met his gaze steadily. "I did not kill them. Red Wolf acted alone. You're the one who surrendered. You claimed responsibility. By military law, that makes you accountable." The colonel paused. "For what it's worth, I believe you were trying to prevent further bloodshed. But I have orders from higher up. They want someone to hang for this, and you've volunteered." After the colonel left, Swift Hawk sat in the gathering darkness, accepting his fate. He had bought his people time. That would have to be enough. But then, on the 5th night, something unexpected happened. A key turned in the lock. Swift Hawk looked up to see Sarah Mitchell standing in the doorway, a lantern in one hand and determination in her eyes. "We don't have much time," she whispered urgently. "Come with me." Swift Hawk stared at her. "You are freeing me?" "I'm not letting them hang an innocent man. Now move, before the guard comes back." She pressed something into his hand, the key to his shackles. "Sarah, if you do this, you will be punished. I know, I don't care. You saved my life twice, Swift Hawk. Now I'm saving yours." Swift Hawk unlocked his shackles, his mind reeling. "How did you—" My father has influence here. He arranged for the guard to be called away for 10 minutes. That's all we have. They moved silently through the fort's shadows, Sarah leading him to a section of the stockade wall where repair work had left a gap. 2 horses waited in the darkness beyond. Go north, Sarah said. Find your people. Live. Swift Hawk turned to her. Come with me. She blinked, startled. What? Come with me. You said yourself you could help bridge our peoples. This is your chance. I can't just abandon my father, my life here. Your father arranged this. He knows what you must do. Swift Hawk took her hand. You have already lived in both worlds. Now choose which one you belong to. Sarah stood frozen, torn between everything she'd known and something new and terrifying and exhilarating. In the distance, a shout went up. The guard had discovered Swift Hawk's empty cell. Decide now, Swift Hawk said urgently. Sarah looked back at the fort, at the life she'd known. Then she looked at Swift Hawk, at the man who'd shown her that enemies could become friends, that different didn't mean wrong, that courage sometimes meant walking away from everything familiar. She climbed onto one of the horses. Ride, she said. They galloped into the night, pursued by shouts and gunfire that faded behind them. They rode hard for 2 days, barely stopping, until they were deep in Comanche territory where the cavalry wouldn't follow. When they finally stopped to rest, Swift Hawk turned to Sarah. You have given up everything for me, he said quietly. Your father, your home, your people. Sarah shook her head. I haven't given up anything. I've chosen something better. A chance to build bridges instead of walls, to teach understanding instead of fear. She touched the turquoise beads he'd given her, which she still wore. You showed me that was possible. Now let me help make it real. They found Black Cloud's camp 3 days later. The chief had moved the tribe north as promised, to a hidden valley where they could rebuild in peace. When Swift Hawk and Sarah rode into camp, gasps of surprise rippled through the people. Black Cloud approached, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile. The spirits have returned you to us, Swift Hawk, and you bring the teacher woman. This is unexpected. She freed me from the white man's prison, Swift Hawk explained. She has chosen to stand with our people. Singing Bird emerged from her teepee, tears streaming down her face as she embraced her son. Then, to everyone's surprise, she embraced Sarah as well. You are brave, the old woman said in halting English she'd learned from Sarah. You are welcome. That night, around the council fire, Swift Hawk told the story of his escape. The elders listened in amazement. When he finished, Black Cloud spoke. The teacher woman has proven her loyalty to our people. She will be adopted into our tribe if she wishes. She will be given a Comanche name and a place among us. Sarah stood, her voice steady despite her nervousness. I would be honored. But I also hope to help both peoples understand each other. To be a bridge between worlds. One of the elders spoke up. You speak our language well now. You know our customs. Perhaps you could teach others among the whites about our ways, as Swift Hawk learned about yours. An idea began to form in Swift Hawk's mind. What if we established a place where both peoples could meet safely? To trade, to talk, to learn from each other. Murmurs ran through the council. The idea was radical, dangerous, but also filled with possibility. Black Cloud considered this. Such a place would need to be neutral ground, protected by both sides. I could speak with my father, Sarah offered, and through him, with the colonel, if we could convince them that peace benefits everyone. It was a long shot, a desperate hope in the face of overwhelming hostility, but it was a hope nonetheless. Over the next months, Swift Hawk and Sarah worked tirelessly. They sent messages through trusted intermediaries. They met with tribal leaders and military officers. They faced rejection, suspicion, and outright hostility from both sides. But slowly, gradually, the idea took hold. A year after Swift Hawk's escape, a remarkable thing happened. A trading post was established on neutral ground between Comanche territory and the expanding frontier settlements. It was guarded by both Comanche warriors and cavalry soldiers. It operated under strict rules of peace that both sides had agreed to honor. And it worked. Traders came from both sides. Families met. Children played together. Old grievances didn't disappear, but they began to soften at the edges. Sarah Mitchell, now known among the Comanche as She Who Bridges Worlds, taught English to Comanche children and Comanche ways to settler children. She wrote articles for Eastern newspapers about the Numunu people, their culture, their humanity. Swift Hawk, now a respected peace chief, negotiated treaties that actually held because both sides had input in their creation. It wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still misunderstandings, still violence when hotheads on either side forgot the lessons of peace. But it was better than war. One evening, 5 years after Sarah's escape from the fort, Swift Hawk and Sarah sat together on a hill overlooking the trading post. They were married now, a union that scandalized some on both sides, but also gave hope to others. Their 2 children, a boy and a girl, played nearby, speaking both English and Comanche with equal fluency, belonging fully to both worlds and to neither. "Do you ever regret it?" Swift Hawk asked. "Giving up your old life?" Sarah thought about this. "I gave up one life to gain another. I lost some things, yes, but I gained so much more." She looked at their children, at the trading post where people from different worlds met in peace, at the man beside her who'd shown her that honor transcended culture. "We didn't end the conflict," she said quietly. "We just proved that another way was possible. That has to count for something." Swift Hawk took her hand. "In our language, there is a saying, 'One person cannot change the wind, but they can adjust the sails.' We adjusted the sails, Sarah. We gave our peoples a chance to choose a different direction." As the sun set over the plains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Swift Hawk thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that moment in the camp when he'd chosen to protect a captive woman, to this moment where that woman sat beside him as his wife and partner in peace. One decision had indeed set off a chain of consequences that no one could have foreseen. But sometimes, the most important decisions are the ones we make not in grand moments of history, but in small moments of individual choice. The choice to show mercy instead of cruelty, to seek understanding instead of revenge, to build bridges instead of walls. Swift Hawk had learned that true strength wasn't about dominating others. It was about lifting others up, protecting the powerless, finding common ground across impossible divides. And in the end, that lesson had saved not just one life, but hundreds. Not just one people, but 2. As darkness fell and stars began to appear in the vast Texas sky, Swift Hawk touched the wooden cross that still hung around his neck, next to his father's bear claw necklace. 2 symbols from different worlds, side by side, no longer in conflict, but in harmony. Just like the peoples they represented. Just like the future they were building together. If you enjoyed this story of courage, sacrifice, and the bridges we build across impossible divides, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that understanding can triumph over hate. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from and what part of Swift Hawk's journey moved you most. And if you want more powerful stories that challenge everything you think you know about history, check out our playlist of untold frontier tales. Until next time, remember, one person's choice to show mercy can change the world.